Hello, everyone. Hello, hello on this wonderful spring day. I hope everybody's doing just great.
Yeah.
So glad to be back and chatting with you guys. Welcome to Courageous Custody, Real Stories, Real Solutions, your weekly dose of empowerment and practical guidance.
We understand that the unique challenges protective parents face in the courtroom is difficult, and our mission is to equip you with strategic thinking and emotional support you need to navigate this difficult journey with strength and resilience. So if you are a protective parent facing seemingly impossible custody battle, you're not alone.
So every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll go live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, bringing you real stories. So you hear stories about courageous parents who have walked in your shoes and emerged victorious in big ways and small. Their journeys will inspire you and offer invaluable insights and expert advice. Get practical strategies from us to help you advocate for your children and manage your trauma also as you go through your custody case.
Yeah, so don't miss out on getting your own insights from our conversations, either live or on our YouTube channel. So we'd love for you to jump in with your own comments as we chat so we can hear from you too. And remember that courage is contagious, and together we can rewrite the narrative for protective parents.
So let's
So
dive in.
let's dive in.
I am the creator of the Custody Blueprint with Best Foot Forward Consulting.
And I'm Atra Tarfa, and I'm an IFS trained trauma recovery coach.
And we just want to remind everyone that when we are talking to you, we are not giving legal advice and we are not giving therapy.
No, neither of those things. But if you do feel triggered, we do want you to take care of yourself. Take a moment, step away, come back to us when you feel a bit safer to really digest the content and contribute to the conversation. So today's topic that we're going to discuss is how to deal with child neglect in your co-parents. This is a
Yeah,
big one today.
it's a big one. It comes up a lot. Luckily, not in every case, but when it does, it's hard. It's very hard. Our case study for today, our story, is about Catherine. Um, Catherine was constantly dealing with this. Her kids were coming home from a weekend with her co-parent wearing the same clothes that she sent them in, but filthy and wrinkled. They'd even go to school much the same way when her co-parent would have the kids for a midweek overnight. She was always describing how the kids' hair was in knots, right? Like one of them had shorter hair and still somehow managed hair to be in knots, right? Constant bruises and scrapes from being unmonitored in the backyard, the kind of scrapes that you can tell, thankfully, are not physical abuse, but are clearly hurt. And the children talk about exactly how, they got it. They fell, they scraped themselves this way and that way. It just no band-aids, no cleaning, nothing. So she talked about how she would glare at her co-parent at exchanges, but her co-parent didn't care. Her co-parent wasn't looking at her, which is honestly probably best anyway. So when we were working with her case, this was, I think, one of the things that she wanted to know what to do about. Now, for today, we're not going to talk about the court piece of that. Today, we're just going to talk about really facing this neglect and dealing with this neglect every time the children walk in the door.
Yeah.
And I think the place to start with really is how to document the neglect, because granted, we're not talking about the court case specifically and how to bring it in, but you do need to be, we talk about documenting just about everything. And I know I've talked in the past about the fact that people are starting to back off of that and say, don't document everything. It's exhausting. But then we have the protective parents who are like, I backed off and relaxed, and now I lost an opportunity to get this, that, and the other thing that the court needed. So I
Mhm.
am still, unfortunately, I get it. I totally understand. It is exhausting, but you got to document just about everything. So there's really there's lots of ways to document, but there are three main ways to document that I like to tell parents about right off the bat. And so with Catherine, the first thing I said was, you got to get photos. You got to get photos. But protective parents, I told her, I said, you have to do this in a different way. When you are taking photos, you have to take them in a way that doesn't put your kids in the middle. They don't need to know why you're taking the photos, right? They really don't. It's not okay. And so you can come up with things that are truthful and doesn't put them in the middle of the court case so obviously, right? You can say, "Oh gosh, grandma's been waiting for a picture of you. Let me just snap it right away and send it to her." And then be truthful, snap it right away and send it to grandma, right? But
Yeah.
get a picture of what they're walking in with, get a picture of something. If it's a scrape or a cut or something like that, I like to offer the advice of using language like let's clean that scrape, but let me get a picture of it because I want to zoom in and see if there's dirt in there to wash out. And it's kind of cool to look at it all zoomed in. Let's take a look at what that looks like. All, what does a cut look like? And so it becomes almost this science thing as well as this cleaning it up thing. And you've got your evidence of this repeated type of injury that keeps coming back. Right.
Yeah, I think it's the way you're phrasing it is you turn these opportunities into teachable moments, right? With your child about maybe how to care for themselves or clean a cut, things like that. So that's in a way that you're not putting them in the middle.
Right.
And it's completely counter shaming, right? Because we know that kids often feel I did something wrong, especially children that
Mhm.
come from these families. And so when we can put it in a phrase that's counter shaming and really sort of teachable moment, so to speak, then it's an opportunity for growth mindset instead of shame.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's an excellent idea too. It gives you more ideas really as to what else you could say with your own kiddos, right?
Mhm.
Um, the second thing I usually like to tell parents is try to get witnesses, and this is hard. It's hard to have somebody there during drop off or whenever it is that the neglect is largely showing up. But I do recommend to try to start having people nearby. And I did tell Catherine this gets hard due to the bias, which is a real bias of friends and family. If you're having friends be witnesses, if you're having family be witnesses, unfortunately, many times their words don't really hold a lot of weight in the court. They don't know whether or not to believe them, they're biased, etc. So, one of the things that I told Catherine was the main person that we like to have is a sitter or a nanny who is there. The question from Catherine was, why would I get somebody if I was there as well? But, there are lots of reasons that a nanny or a sitter might be there. You might be about to go out and, you wanted to just say goodbye to them before you head out and left them with a sitter, whatever it might be. Other people would be neighbors, a play date parent, a coworker, if this is happening at work or anything like that, or some other peer. Think of somebody who's more of a peer who could be considered neutral, could be considered unbiased. So we talked about it and we made a plan with Catherine as to who that would be. She had a play date parent come in to start a play date as soon as her kiddos got home. And then she also confided in neighbors to just keep an eye out. And so they were keeping an eye out. So they were able to speak to what they were noticing when the kids were dropped off.
Yeah. And this particular point or tip that you're sharing, when we talk about spaces of safety and co-regulation, this is exactly what we're talking about. Having someone that can be sort of self energy or a calm nervous system or a supportive nervous system in the space of you and your child,
Mm,
so that you can really have someone kind of go, I see that too, or I sort of get it, or just feeling that validation that often these protective moms don't get on a daily basis.
right.
So having that validation is so, so important.
Yeah. The last way that we decided to work on this with Catherine that I say to a lot of clients is if you get recordings. If you're in a state, you have to start out by checking the recording laws in your state to make sure that you're in a one-party consent state. Because if you're in an all-party consent or two-party consent state, then everyone who's being recorded has to agree to be recorded. But in a one-party consent state, generally speaking, as long as there's one person in the conversation who is aware that there is a recording happening, then it's perfectly legal to do that. So then what is it, that you're trying to do? Well, what I talked to Catherine about was start the recording as you're leaving the house. Yeah, we're going to hear the rustling of your phone or whatever you're using in your purse, or your jacket or whatever it might be. We're going to hear the car starts. We're going to hear the music that's playing, that type of thing. But what we're trying to capture here is that we know definitively when you first get the kids, right? And so I told her, I said, it's absolutely going to be clear that you didn't speak to the children before you saw them. So you didn't feed them the line, well, daddy was asleep and, we accidentally touched something hot or whatever it might be. You didn't feed them any of that. How could you have? It's been recording since back when you were putting on your shoes and before you saw the kids. Right. And if they're coming your way, same thing, right? If you see the car pull up, whatever it is, you start recording right then and there. We hear the door open, we hear the kids come in, etc. I told Catherine to keep recording for 45 minutes after the kids got home. Parents talk about the fact that their kids will reveal things randomly at any given moment. But we do know that kids are more likely to reveal most of the stuff within the first 45 minutes of having gotten with the protective parent. And that's also going to be when their memory of it, their telling of it is going to be more trustworthy in general to the people who are listening to it. Now, I want to stop here and I want to say that, there are evaluators, there are lawyers who are listening to this and cringing and saying, we don't want them recording the kids. It looks bad. The court hates that. I agree. The court hates it. So remember that when we're gathering documentation, right, you're not going to use all of it. So I told Catherine, I said, look, you're going to have all these recordings, but we're really only looking for the ones that are needed for court, right? This isn't like some huge fishing expedition. It's about you being a protective parent. It was distasteful to her. Of course, it was distasteful. It is distasteful, right? But there are two reasons that we have that recording. One is so that when they accuse you of, oh, yeah, when I dropped off the kids, she was yelling and screaming at me and saying these things to me, then it's kind of like I have a recording of every exchange. Tell me what date that was, and I'll bring it up and show it to the court that, you're not telling the truth. And now we've sort of, chipped away their credibility, which is important when they're putting on the charm for the court. We have to show that there's actually a real lack of credibility there. The other reason that we might use it is indeed if there's something that the kids have revealed that is particularly serious, then that could be useful, right? It could be helpful. But I think it's not great to tell the court that you are doing this. Rather, just do what you need to do and then use it if it needs to be used. What I recommended to Catherine is something I recommend to a lot of people, and that is to download the Otter app, Otter, like the animal, Otter. I'm a big fan of Otter. I like to use them quite a bit. With Otter, what I like is that they will have a transcription. And certainly you can upgrade and get longer transcriptions, and that may be something anyone wants to do, but they'll transcribe, I think, like the first 20 or 30 minutes of something for free.
Okay.
Obviously, I've just talked about recordings that are a bit longer, but you're still getting a good bit of it transcribed already for you, which can be money saving later on. It can also be a good resource for you if you want to search your Otter files later for when, little Peggy was talking about her doll being run over, by somebody's bike or whatever. It's kind of like, I remember that because that's when Peggy was talking about her doll being run over by a bike. You search those keywords and you can find that recording pretty easily. So Otter makes the documentation of these recordings so much easier. But again, you're not really planning to use these recordings, but you want to be recording them from the time that, you leave or the time you see the car pull up all the way to about 45 minutes after the kiddos are back in the protective parent's care. And so Catherine started doing that, and it gave her some peace of mind.
Another thing that Otter does is it summarizes whatever it's recorded. So
That's
often
right.
our protective moms, their prefrontal cortex is inaccessible. And a lot of the times when they're in the survival mode of the sympathetic nervous system state of, I've just, got to make sure my kids are safe, make sure we're all safe, and in the midst of all of this, making sure they're fed at the school on time with the, clothes that actually fit them and all these things that they do to be wonderful moms that they are. There's the bandwidth is just stretched so thin to sit there and go back through and listen and remember and then process from, their memory. And just from a neuroscience perspective, if they're not getting sleep, all of these things in their brain and their hippocampus and all of that, that is just haywire.
Mhm.
And to have a tool that not only can summarize an event, but then put bullet point outlines to the event too, it it's really helpful and alleviates the "I can't" feeling or the overwhelmed feeling that can often happen with our protective moms when they're facing, you know, the task of having to document almost everything.
Yeah, it's a lot. It
Yeah.
feels like it's just constantly happening. It's a lot, right?
Yeah. Completely a lot. And that reminds me to just sort of speak to the concept of this helplessness feeling that, how to deal with their feelings of helplessness when they do identify neglect happening. And having those audio recordings is a way to, like you said, two reasons to have it is a way to sort of meet those parts of us that feel helpless. It's like, okay, I can't sort of be there when my child is not with me, but at least I can document the after effects of what's occurred, whether those after effects are psychological, physical, emotional. There is documentation of those after effects. So maybe we can speak a little bit to um, those feelings of helplessness. I know there's specific things that we can say that protective moms can say to their co-parent about the neglect, but I wanted to go over maybe a few ways in which when you encounter like those feelings of helplessness, what we can do in those moments. And this is a reoccurring thing that we have in our clients of this, I just feel so helpless. We hear that a lot. I just feel so helpless. And that's painful because we're moms. We are part of the mom job is to help, right? Is to help our kids. And so when we feel like we can't fulfill our duty, there's this overwhelm that can take over. And so it's really helpful just to cultivate self-compassion towards the parts of us that feel helpless. And that really just involves acknowledging what's happening, that it's painful to watch, it's painful to feel, but to go, you know what, I'm feeling helpless, and to acknowledge it without judgment of oneself. Because often what we tend to see is I feel helpless and it's my fault. If I would
Mm.
have never married this person, if I would have just said this then, and there's just this overwhelming sense of if I just blame myself, then I can maybe control the outcome next time. And the fact of the matter is, when you're dealing with a coercive controlling parent or a neglectful parent, there is really not much that you can do to get that person to stop behaving that way. That's why you're now in the situation where you're in a custody battle because this person hasn't been cooperative. So there's no sense in blaming yourself for the responsibility and the shame that this other parent should be owning. So stepping into a space of compassion towards yourself, no blaming yourself for the situation or the neglectful parent's impact on the child, and really just taking a second. It can literally be a moment and offering yourself some kindness and some understanding. Like, you know what, Catherine, you're feeling helpless at the moment, and I get it. It's hard to feel this way, and I just want you to know that it's going to be okay, and that you're doing your best, and that I understand. Of course, anybody would feel helpless in this sort of situation. And not only just offering yourself self-compassion, but when we can do that best when we're not in this place of overwhelm. So it's good to maybe take a mindful moment and envision an internal environment that is calming. So when there is these helpless parts that come about, to just take a second and visualize a calming space. Maybe there's a place with your kid that you love being the most, something from your own childhood, something that is just complete fantasy and made up. Just any sort of technique that can visualize a place where you can really offer yourself some compassion, and then get into a dialogue space with this part of you that may be feeling helpless. Getting into that dialogue space really kind of gets underneath what this part of you believes, because helplessness in a sense, is not necessarily a feeling as to more so a belief. Gabor Mate told me once, that's not a feeling, Hachira, that's a belief. You believe that you're helpless. So what is it that you believe that you're helpless about? What are you afraid of that's going to happen if you don't intervene in this way? So really practicing active
Mhm.
listening in that dialogue space is really sort of how to meet those helpless parts of us where we are, and then getting that empathetic understanding and providing reassurance to yourself um, is really a place where that open-heartedness can occur so that it doesn't overflow into other spaces, right? Because when we feel often helpless, that overwhelm kicks in, and then we get back into that sympathetic energy, and we're in that trauma response of fight or flight. And that's no good for anyone. So when we're able to just sort of go, okay, this is not a situation that's really what I prefer. It's also not my fault that it's this way. Let me be kind to myself. Let me just picture for a moment a place where we're all safe. Let me find out what this helplessness belief is really all about. And let me really listen to what I need to hear about how I can move forward in this situation. Those are really 4 key ways in working with these helpless parts of us.
I think when we my question to that would be the blame, the shame, within ourselves. Yeah, that's very common. Sometimes I feel like with many of the parents I work with that comes later. That first comes fury, helpless fury. At the co-parent. How hard can it be to just put them in clean clothes? How hard can it be to go buy a shirt? How hard can it be, to do this, to do that, to make sure that they've got their homework, to help them do their homework, to get them a meal, to get them 3 square meals a day, to get them something healthy? How hard is it? And so, I think there's a lot of fury there too that, is very well, it very much leads to helplessness, doesn't it?
It
This
does. It
fury,
all
because you
does.
can't right, because you can't start I mean, many people do, and it hurts your case because you can't start screaming at them. The court wants to see both the court very much wants to see both of the parents be the problem, and as soon as you start yelling to them, "Why aren't you feeding my kid? Why on earth are the children wearing dirty clothes? Why are they barefoot? Why are they not wearing a coat and short sleeves in 42-degree weather?" And so it gets a little tricky to have that kind of helplessness, I think.
Absolutely. And I believe that, these coercive controlling parents, they know that our protective moms, and they know our protective moms are caring moms, and they know our protective moms hate feeling helpless. Do not, these parts, they just try to suppress or get away. That's why I'm saying build a relationship with these parts of us that feel helpless, because the coercive controlling parent knows that our protective moms don't like feeling helpless at all. And so what they'll do is they'll weaponize that to the point
Yep,
where,
that's
okay,
right.
I'm going to put you in a place where you feel helpless because you can't control what I'm doing over here. So I'm
Right.
going to create a situation where you feel helpless so then I can then document your reactivity or
Yeah.
document your fury or any of
And
the
I'm gonna hurt the children so that I'm gonna hurt you.
absolutely. And
Yeah,
there you have the coercive control, which the
that's
courts
right.
don't understand,
Not
right?
at all. No, no. Well, I shouldn't say not at all, but I will say generally speaking. Yeah. Well, so I think one of the things we can talk about today in regards to your co-parent is, what to say to your co-parent about that neglect. Do you call them out on it? What do you do about it? And going back to Catherine, so I taught her a very specific way of both documenting and talking to her co-parent. And I think, before I jump into it, I think the first place to really start is to remember that many of these co-parents don't care. You're not going to change them, right? They can't be changed because you're emailing them and telling them to do better. So really where I start is I say, look, document it first. Just document it because that might be all that you need to do here. knowing that you're not going to change, knowing that indeed, if you are to say something, they may very well dig in their heels and continue to do it and deepen it and worsen it. Right. And
Yeah.
so many times I think I know that a lot of clients, and Catherine was very frustrated at first when I would say nothing to do here except take care of your kiddos when they come home and to document it. Right. Because we're talking the kind of neglect that doesn't really move the needle for CPS, doesn't really move the needle for the court. Right. It's either not provable or it's not enough. Right.
Hmm.
So then what kind of neglect are we looking at? We've had clients come to us and say, my kid describes, and his sister describes, that he almost drowned, that they had to, kind of pump water out of him. And what we have heard, what I have sat in court and heard is, look, it was an accident. It only happened that one time. So it's not a pattern. Therefore, it's just an accident. It could have happened to any of us. Right. Whereas the protective parent knows that the co-parent was doing something else, on the phone, at a party, drinking a beer, doing whatever. But we can't expect that what is obviously neglect is what the court will see as neglect, unfortunately. Right.
Unfortunately.
And there are many times that we want to call something neglect that doesn't actually, by CPS bylaws, by CPS rules, by CPS policy, doesn't quite make it to that level. So with Catherine, I said, document it first and then maybe write to your co-parent. And when when you do talk to your co-parent, it's not verbally. We do want writing. Always want writing. And I had told her that when you write, do it with a tone of non-sarcastic curiosity and helpfulness. I remember I made the mistake of mentioning to a group of moms in a session that we were all having that it can be one, type of language you can use is to say, I'm a little confused what exactly happened here. And I'm confused by this, appeared all the time everywhere with these moms. And I'm confused by this. The majority of the time using it actually sounds sarcastic. It does. And so you have to kind of express that curiosity, express it in a way that doesn't sound snarky. And indeed, it should be coupled with a helpfulness. For example, instead of I am noting that you sent Jenny home in dripping wet shoes she says she wore since yesterday. Please do better. Right. You don't want to write that, right? So with Catherine, what we came up with her was she ended up writing, I noticed Jenny's shoes were wet when she came home, and she said they got wet at yesterday's kids' hike. I think I'll be able to clean them okay, but just wanted to let you know her shoe size so that maybe you can pick up a backup pair in the future. Right. Could it read as snarky? It would be difficult. And we would want the court to look at the sincerity of it. Right. So, Catherine ended up including Jenny's shoe size. And that was her way of documenting what had happened. So what did we get from that? In writing that, what the court then gets from it is Jenny came home with wet shoes. She was walking around in wet shoes. Jenny identified that they had been wet for over a day. So as the child slept last night, Jenny's shoes were not cleaned, were not taken care of, were not dried. And then we've got mom saying, hey, I'll handle it. So what we've got there is mom saying, I'm the one who handles things. I am the one who takes care of these children. I am the one who knows how to make sure they're not neglected. And then, just wanted to let you know her shoe size. Well, Catherine, we already had the shoe size in OFW. They use Our Family Wizard. We already had it under the files or the section where you can write shoe size. You can write stuff like that. We already had it updated. And, with the OFW, which I know whenever something is entered in there, it has the date and it has who did it.
Timestamp and everything.
It's timestamped and everything. So there was proof positive that Catherine had a couple months earlier put Jenny's new shoe size in there, and it was accurate, and it was Catherine who had done it. And so, her co-parent already had the shoe size. So her co-parent could have had a backup pair. Now her co-parent could come back and say, I did have a backup pair, to which the question comes, why exactly couldn't you have put her in those shoes then? Or, well, I was afraid they weren't going to come back. Why wouldn't they come back? Everything I've sent you has come back. Well, not that toy. Jenny, I don't know what Jenny, that toy's in her backpack. I don't know where it is. I mean, just all honesty. And then she's suggesting that he does pick up that backup pair, as I just mentioned.
Yeah.
That's a very different way of writing. And so
That's a
again,
very
it's non-sarcastic curiosity and helpfulness, right? Just sort of like, how can I help you parent, right? How can I help you think? How can I help you be a parent? And
Yeah.
so, and look, the truth of the matter is, when the kind of protective parents that we're dealing with, many of them, they're co-parents before, there was a divorce filed, before they went into court, couldn't be bothered with the kids anyway. So
Right.
yeah, you kind of do need to learn how to parent,
They
you
do.
know.
They
Yeah,
do.
I've heard plenty of parents, I've heard plenty of co-parents, abusive parents say even in court, "I don't need a book. I don't need a class. I'm a parent. That's just natural." And it's kind of like, okay, well, there is an entire part of Barnes and Noble. There's like thousands of entry and millions of, I don't even know, tens of thousands of entries in Amazon with parenting books that people find very, very helpful. So get
Yes.
away from your narcissism and start accepting that you parent and maybe you can even co-parent someday, right? And so that's how we approached it. That's how Catherine and I wrote. That's how I talk to clients about, how can we document this? How can we memorialize this in a way that doesn't clue them into what you're doing, although they may see it, but more importantly, clearly is not done in a triggering way.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you speak to about the fury that's inside, that it's often that the fury is what can lead in writing that response or that OFW message because you've seen neglect. And so when we have that, when it's just not fury that's leading, when it's really curiosity and being helpful, that's what's going to lead. And that's what the tone is going to come out when we read these messages. It's very clear when someone feels like they're writing from a place of fury because they're so upset. How could you do this?
Yeah.
Versus, hey, this is about the kid, and I want to make sure that you and I are both setting our child up best for success.
Yeah. Yep. Well, okay. So I think we've given a lot of food for thought for this week. So that's all for this week's episode of Courageous Custody. Before we go, thank you so much for joining us, whether live or many of you on replay. We're so grateful to have helped in any way we may have.
Yeah, we have some great takeaways for this week. Use writing to approach your co-parent with a curious tone to see if you can budge them to take care of the kids. Document with photos and witnesses and recordings of you, and offer yourself some self-compassion and some kindness in a very calm environment, whether that's visually, so that you can really not internalize blame for the neglect that you're seeing that your co-parent is impacting your child with.
Next week, join us again at 7 o'clock Eastern here. Like or follow or bookmark or click on that bell so that you can get the notifications and not miss a thing, because what we're talking about might catch you just when you need it. And don't forget to check the comments to get a free copy of the court appearance prep list right there in the comments. You can click on that, and that is free of charge. And you can go to thecustodyblueprint.com to learn about the different ways to get help in your case.
And leave your own comments. Was that? Oh, leave your own. I didn't want to make sure I was interrupting you. We are live. Leave your own comments about your experience with this topic, and really any topics that you'd like discussed in the future. Wherever you are listening, remember you're not alone. And until next week, we encourage you to stay strong, to stay informed, and to really keep fighting for what matters.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.